السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا من علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. Glory to be you who have the knowledge, accept what you have taught us. Verily it is you, the all-knower and the all-wiser. That's Surah Al-Baqarah 2.32 verse. One of the good things about this program, first of all, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am your host today. My name is Hashim Duale, and I have a very packed program today because I have a very good people who really are knowledgeable of what they're talking about because they have a lived experience. Themselves are autistic, and we will be delving into that later. You know already Dylan. Dylan is one of the regulars of this program. He is co-host, I can say that. And anything that I say here, he is either producing this program or he is sitting in that chair. Hello, Dylan.
Hello, Hashim. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. So let me introduce our guest today, who's on the monitor, sitting his home. And he has given us his day off as well. Please welcome Trevor Wright. Trevor, welcome to the program. This is Ramadan Radio, and it's Leicester 8.770 FM live. And we also live in the media like Facebook. We are live onto YouTube. And we become global these days. So thank you for giving us your time. First and foremost, I see after your name, 4 letters, FRSA. Please welcome and first start what those letters stand for.
Right. Hi, everybody, and thanks for inviting me on the program, Hashim. FRSA is Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. So I've been a fellow for about 3 years now, I think. The Royal Society is based in London, but has fellows around the world, 40,000, I think. And society, full title is Society for the Encouragement of Arts, Manufactures and Commerce. But really, that's the basis of where fellows of the society come from. And the common thing is people who've got a bit of a track record in those different areas, arts or whatever, who are interested in changing the world for the better, I think, is the reason why we come together. So that's the society itself. It really is about making change for the better, and harmony, I think, is the best way of putting it.
I did start that because you are a change maker, and you are one of those people who really put on the light about the autism in world. Just before we delve into your former social worker, you've been a lead commissioner, you chair many national and local umbrella groups, and also one of the things that caught my eye is that you are what I call this one, and you and I as also you are one of those people who are tirelessly there to help not only individuals but also the institutions. Can you tell me more about your different hats so that people can understand more?
Yeah, as you've already said, Hashim, I was a former social worker and commissioner, somebody who was kind of responsible for getting the right services for people. I actually live in Derby, so that's the last place that I worked. And making sure that those services are decent quality. Excuse me. It was part of that where I was diagnosed myself. We were kind of talking about individual cases of autistic people, and I started to recognise some of the characteristics. So I got diagnosed myself at 56, and then 3 years later, my daughter was diagnosed as autistic as well. So having spent 50 odd years kind of not quite fitting in, and then learning that I was autistic, which for me was a very positive thing to do. It's really, I've been spending a lot of time. I left working as a social worker and set myself up as an autism consultant. So yeah, partly to help other individuals, because I've got my bus pass now, so hopefully I've got a few years of experience that I can offer to younger people. But also, I quite often find that organisations want to change but don't quite know how to do it. So that's the other part of my role, sort of working with NHS, Department of Health, recently in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, and trying to be that little voice that says, have you thought about this? Have you thought about doing it this way instead of that way? It's those kind of things that have driven me recently in recent years.
And I like that. For example, one of the roles is to be champion, talking to the service providers here in Leicestershire and Rutland, to make sure that the services they offer are fit for the organization. Let me bring you back in. You said that you've been diagnosed at 56 of age.
Yeah.
What induced you to go at that age to check yourself? Because you achieved everything you wanted to achieve. You're a social worker. You're walking. You know how to cope, how to do everything by yourself. What it is that particularly made you to go and have a diagnosis at that age? Because many people are still not sure. So that's my question is into that.
I think it's a personal choice. As you say, Hashim, I got married, got a daughter, young daughter then, and reasonably stable job. But I had this thing where I did a lot of the time, I didn't feel like I fitted into anything. I didn't know where I belonged. I felt like part of me was maybe I wasn't a fully rounded person, maybe is a good way of putting it. And then when I started to do that autism work in Derby, Derbyshire as a commissioner, and I started to recognise those characteristics, like sensory differences, and I'm not very good socially in social groups. I really, really struggle. I just don't know what the rules are. I can't read people's body language, and so I particularly fell out of things in social groups and was probably a bit of a loner. So it was to find out whether I was autistic or not. But I was also thinking of the people around me, family, particularly my daughter at that point was, I don't know, 10, 11. So thinking that, if I can find out who I am in a sense, and then explain it to family and my daughter. And I'd already learnt that sometimes there are links in families. So when one person is diagnosed, perhaps it's the spotlight will go on somebody else in the family. And I thought, well, I've got a responsibility now. I need to know in case we need to kind of look at my daughter. And that's why a couple of years later, she was actually diagnosed herself. I think if I hadn't have been, nobody in school, in her school, would have picked it up. So for me, it was a positive thing, but I kind of recognise that for other people, it's not quite so straightforward.
Because one of the things that we try to project, because autism is a spectrum. Successful people like you and here, Dylan, I'll come back to him as well, and others. So kind of making sure that parents with young autistic children just to see people like you, so that they can at least see future, because all, including myself, parents of autistic children, we concentrate more of their shortcoming rather than their bright spots, and we worry too much that they might not be successful. So one of the ways that today we're celebrating with guests like you is to tell the world that with a right way and dedication, autistic people can be successful. I come back to you in a minute. Dylan, welcome back.
Hello.
Because, as we hear Trevor, I learn every day I meet Trevor new things. I didn't know that he was late diagnosed at the age of 56. At your age, when you were diagnosed around 9, 10?
About 10, yeah.
About 10. What that helps you with? Because I know many parents now, they kind of try to say, I don't want to label my daughter or son, so I keep it because they're doing well. Yes. So why I go to that extent and labeling them? So what do you want to say to those parents?
Well, I'd say two things. One, it really was helpful when I found out about my autism, because it started to answer a lot of questions about how I'd been growing up, about why I reacted the way to certain things. But the second part is actually more so, it then started giving me the idea of what I could do to then try and learn new techniques, like coping strategies, what I could do to try and challenge myself to move forwards. So a great example would be like most social skills, when you look amongst neurotypicals, they're not really learned. You don't sit in a classroom and learn them, right? You kind of just pick them up naturally. Whereas for someone like myself, I don't. But because I've now been taught them, in some ways, I've actually become better at understanding it than neurotypicals, because I've actually been taught a lot more about those kind of things, whereas someone else would just naturally pick them up.
Indeed. Since this program is not only us talking, I invite everyone who's listening, if they have pertinent questions, to call us in the studio, or you can use the media to ask any questions, because our producers are there to pick up all the questions and put me here on the screen. So even if you call, your call will be answered, and we can, if you prefer, put you live. Please don't be guest, take part of the program. Thank you, Dylan. Coming back to Trevor, as a social worker who was there working, at the time, were you working in adult or in a children's social service side?
Yeah, most of the time in adults. So I started in the 1980s as an unqualified worker, helping people with learning disabilities move out of the big hospitals, and then worked with disabled people, older people with dementia, some children, but only kind of 14, those that were what we call preparing for adulthood, so 14 to 25. I was a bit scared of the little ones. I've got to be honest, when I was younger, before I had my own daughter, I was a bit scared of those little children, because I wasn't quite sure what you did with them. But since having my daughter, that's changed. So if I was still a social worker, I'd be less scared of working with younger children, I think. So pretty much most different adult groups, and as I said, children down to 14.
The reason I ask that question is that some parents, especially BAME communities, they have no good idea about the role of social service in a young person's or a child or an adult in any case. They kind of bit sometimes afraid of involving social worker, and I can understand, because I come from that culture as well. Because we think sometimes the social workers are there to knock our door when things are going wrong, and they are there to take our children away from us. So kind of that mentality. And then you will see many parents struggling. They don't know that a social worker assigned to them could be an asset. So what can you say to those parents who are not a trusting system, especially when it comes to social work role?
Yeah, I get the fact that people can be reluctant and a bit suspicious. It's interesting. There was a report published in the last few days that says very much the same thing about autism and BAME communities, that it's the suspicion and the lack of connection to organisations like social workers by people in those communities that get in the way of people making contact. I it, it's I think, and I think social workers have still got quite a bit to learn about autism and different communities. I think that's for sure. Um, in terms of advantages, it's a bit like Dylan was saying earlier. Um, First of all, if somebody is diagnosed, it unlocks doors. It's like a piece of paper that starts to get you access to things, whether that's financial support or just knowledge. If an autistic child's got some things around sensory things, for example, so if you're sensitive to lights and sound, like me and my daughter, it can impact on your behavior. So, parents being able to understand that by talking to social workers is one example of how things can be useful. It can unlock some benefits. It can unlock kind of help in school for the kids. So, things that get labeled special educational needs. Again, thinking about my daughter, she finds it difficult to understand essay and exam questions, so she needs the questions put into her in a different way. Unless the school knows that she's autistic, or she's actually now in university, unless the university knows, then it's harder to help her. So yeah, understand that there's barriers, that there's kind of suspicions. I would say that for the kids, then there are kind of positives in terms of what kind of help that you might get once you've got the piece of paper.
Thank you very much. Dylan,
I was just going to add to that as well, actually. One of the things I would personally say, Trevor, I don't know how much you'd agree with this, is it also can depend on the social worker, because, of course, that relationship between the social worker and the family is really important. Now, I was very lucky that when I was in Sefton, I got put with a fantastic social worker, and she's still now a dear friend of our family to this day. We're talking back in 2008, 2009. So to forge a friendship from that 15 years on, with the right person, it really does make that kind of difference.
So we agree all that if the families are struggling, bringing in the social worker early stage is important for many reasons, so that it can help.
It's better to do it early than leave it late, because the problem is that fear that you mentioned about the child potentially being taken away, that probability will go up if you leave it and put it off till too late. Because if you know you're struggling, you can bring them in early, you can start to work with them, they can see that you are trying to work with them as well.
Indeed.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Dylan, and in that I've learned that once kind of your child gets to big school, that's when being in school really starts to become a struggle. So getting that sorted before they get to 10, 11 is quite important, because once they go to big school, a lot of the familiarity disappears. You're instead of one teacher a day or two teachers a day, you've got loads. Instead of staying in one classroom in one day, you're having to move around 5 or 6 during the day in secondary school. You've got different teachers, different environment. So getting an understanding before you kind of get to school is good, and getting to secondary school is even better, I think. It just helps the child.
I invite all out there parents who are listening to us to call in. The direct number is 0116 482 2086. I repeat, the number at the studio that you can interact live with this program is 0116 482 2086. You can also text us or WhatsApp us on 077 488 55055. And the reason I say that is we like this program not to be one way only. So it's interactive. Parents out there, you have really qualified consultants here who are really talking about what they lived through, who they helped, and all that package of experience they lended us there. And really, one of them are being paid today. They are lending their expertise to us free of charge. Let's use as much as we can next 25 minutes. Coming back to the children, especially teenage times, that's when hormones change, schools change, and all that. Trevor, ask your experience, someone who went through that, not knowing at the time, and now raising your daughter. What you can give parents that are in that situation that cannot figure out the way to do it?
Yeah, there's lots. I'm thinking about my daughter. I mean, she's 22 now, but that difficult thing that you can have with any teenager, whether they're autistic or not, whenever as you've said, Hashim, that hormones kick in, different for girls and boys, or people in between. But that creates things for any parent that can be difficult to handle. And none of us get a handbook, do we, when the child's born? Your child may do this, and in those circumstances, here's some handy hints. A lot of us depend on kind of other parents or families to, like in my instance, granny, my daughter won't do this. What do I do? Please help. But so, there's family networks, but there's also kind of voluntary sector networks that can help as well. I know there's a few in Leicestershire, but here in Derbyshire, we've got Derbyshire Autism Services, who are at the end of the phone, can answer.
We have finally a call. Let me interrupt you. The callers have the president here. Hello, caller.
Hello, brother. You all right?
I'm all right. Yes, welcome to the program. I hope that you've been listening to us. Hold the program.
Yes. Well, I work in a school, brother, so I won't reveal my name due to my students listening. However, I work with some students who are very severely autistic and suffer from very ADHD traits. I was wondering, I'm a pastoral member. I was wondering what steps would I be able to take to help calm them down and ease them into the surroundings.
That's a good question. We have two experts here. Go first, Trevor. You catch the question.
Could I just check that I heard it? Was it around behaviour and helpful things to help calm people down?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's kind of understanding what led up to the thing that you see, to what people call the kind of behaviour moment. So it's kind of first understanding what, and I use something called the 3 Ps. Is it something about the place that they're in? So, my thing about bright lights or things. Is it something about something that's the person has been asked to do that they may find difficult, and so anxieties are rising? It's kind of working out those kind of things. At the moment that somebody gets very agitated, then there's a number of different things. It's difficult to comment on unless you know the specific circumstances. But that thing about soothing voice, making sure somebody's safe. Is there a quiet room that somebody can go into and just have half an hour of just being left on their own? So long as there's no risk there. It's those kind of things. I don't think any one thing really works with any one instance. It depends on the context of it. I don't know if you got anything you could add there, Dylan.
Well, you can't. Again, I would absolutely agree with everything you've said so far, Trevor. But the other thing I would add is, and this is something where I think it does show a certain level is see if you can get them to recognize when they're getting to those levels toward a meltdown. So the quiet room is an absolutely a fantastic idea. I had one in my high school. It was an old office where like the English faculty used to sit in, and there used to be a beanbag and just a couple of photographs in it. There was like nothing that you could use to harm yourself. It was like the only soft items in the room, and then these pictures were all associated with calming memories for me. It's like
so you're saying knowing and letting the child.
Well, that would be one of the questions, yes. So I use what's called the 1 to 5 scale.
Okay.
So 1 would be where I'd like to think all 4 of us are right now, cool, calm, collected. 2 might be like kind of your nerves before you go into an exam. Of course, 3 is where you start to get angry. 5 is throwing chairs around, you know.
As I was before the program starts. First couple of minutes, okay. Go on, continue.
And then, of course, one of the big challenges will be, which I know worked with me, is can the child in question actually recognise when they get to that level? Because I do know some children I've worked with will go straight from a 1 to a 5 like that. That's the way they view it. But actually, if you go over with them after a meltdown, you can show them the signs, and they do start to learn when they get to their different numbers. So if you can work with them on that, maybe get them to realise what a 3 or a 4 is, and find a way to communicate with the teacher how to get out. Now, when I first was told about it in school, I was told to put my hand up and show the numbers. But I didn't like that system, because in mainstream school, if it's a student that's causing that, like through bullying or whatsoever, you're giving them the reaction they want still. So how I changed it is I used to put my hand up to get the teacher or the support teacher to come over, and I'd ask if I could go to the toilet, but using my other hand placed on the table, I would place 3 or 4 fingers. So if the support teacher or the teacher's looking down, they know I'm on the verge of a meltdown, and that's my reason to get out of there. But for everyone else in the classroom, I've just gone to the toilet. No one needs to know.
I hope that was helpful to you, sir.
Yes, funny you say that, actually, that's some of the systems that we've already put in place. It was just the after effect. So we've got some students who, when a teacher tells them off, they instantly have a meltdown, or due to some medication changes, they're not really able to regulate. And then we as pastoral have to compete with it. And I know it does disturb some classes, so sometimes we get the teachers and everyone out into a separate class, but then it now comes to dealing with the child. And unfortunately, sometimes it does result in having to call parents and escalate it. But I was wondering if there was any ways that, like you said, there's steps on that to prevent from leading into that, the behavior aspects kicking in.
There are also APC charts where, because as Trevor said, we always concentrate when the behavior is happening or the meltdown is happening. What we need to investigate is mostly what causes this child to go there, as Trevor said. I thank you for your call. We have many callers coming in, and really we appreciate that the schools now have people like you who are dedicated on this, and thank you very much. And
thank you very much for your time,
and we respect your privacy, because I know that it is good as well. But you made your point, and parents can listen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, again, one of the ways that parents, and including myself, when you have a child whose communication is very limited, I hate to use the word non-verbal. There is nothing non-verbal. They are communicating to you. So you, the parent, and the schools need to understand what they're saying and not frustrate them all. So in conditions like that, for example, when we were talking about the meltdown when they come to puberty stage, I will come to you to that, because we have a young man here who been there recently. Since they cannot communicate with you, all you can see is their frustration. And parents worry, because what they have been seeing is a very calm child who go to about their school, come back, they were handling the situation, let me put it that way. And then all of a sudden, when they reach 15, 14, 16, to that age, everything goes upside. And when they cannot communicate, when they cannot tell you, or you cannot understand. I always put the pressure on the parent and the teachers and those who are around, because young person needs to be understood. If we fail to do that, I have what we can do, parents in that situation, Trevor.
Yeah, I think, going back to the previous caller, shouting and demanding just tends to make things worse. So there's something about when you're in the moment, about just calmly explaining, using Dylan's scale. You're at a 4 and you're getting close to a 5. Can we just take a minute? But there are resources out there. I was just thinking there's something new called Autism Central, which is a website that's particularly been set up by partly National Autistic Society, with, I think, funding from the government. But it's got lots of different resources for parents. So there are things that you can look at there. And then I think the last thing is probably just, as you said, Hashim, just because somebody's non-verbal or non-speaking, it doesn't mean that they're not communicating. I was taught this phrase, all behavior has meaning. So, some of that non-verbal behaviors, as you rightly said, is very anxiety and frustration coming out. And it's starting to understand those kind of non-verbal things. So people who rock and hand flap, for example, you can start by watching kind of how that changes. You can start to understand different things that they're communicating. I know somebody who works in supported living who says that he works with a young teenage woman who hand flaps, so kind of shakes a hand at the side of her head. But by looking at the speed and the angle and how often and how fast that she does this hand flapping thing, you can start to learn sort of the basics of what she's trying to tell people. It takes quite a while, to be fair, but so understanding the individual's communication can make a big difference.
Indeed. Dylan, I come back to you. When you are approaching the puberty, I understand that there are a lot of things but you could read and find out yourself what was happening to you. Was there something that helped you more, or the family helped you more? How?
No, I mean, when it came to that part of my life, actually a lot of lessons based on that in school I wasn't really in for, because I had lessons more focusing on my social skills instead. So for PHSE on Mondays, I used to have a mentor I'd go and see, and we'd do like extra activities to help me maybe learn about social skills and expressions, things like that. And then on Wednesdays, I had my circle of friends, which was the people in my form who'd go over like the last week with me and point out somewhere in some areas where I've done really well, like some social scenarios and the way I've been like in group activities, and then in some areas where I could still work on improving. So that worked for me because it was actually my own age group. Because the big thing for me, especially once I went to Lutterworth College, once I was 15, 16, is that I actually kind of wanted to be away from my support teachers. I wanted the kind of thing of that if I need them, I know I can access them, but actually I don't want them around all the time. Because I was getting to the point where I actually felt, no offense to them, but they were getting in my way. Like I couldn't, like they were almost acting as a hindrance on me making friends, if that makes sense. Because when they're there, like everyone else in school sees that, oh yeah, you're the different kid because you're the reason there's a support teacher, if that makes sense. So I wanted to try and build my confidence up so I didn't have them in the room. Because if I needed to go, there was still a place I could still talk to them. And once I started college, that's one thing I really liked. So I went to college in Nuneaton. And the way they have it is their student support centre. It's smack bang in the middle of the college. Like you can't miss it. But the rule is they don't give you like support teachers and that. If you need to go there, you can go there. They don't mind that at all. Like there's a few of the rooms you can go into. But for the main part of the classroom, they don't put support stuff in there unless it's like absolutely necessary. And I really felt that helped me start to almost mature a bit, because I knew at that point I could get out there on my own if I needed to. And if I needed to go to them, I could. Of course, if I had free periods, I could still go and do my own thing. I wasn't having them like constantly around me. I think especially once I reached that age, I needed to try and see if I could be more independent.
thank you for saying that, because there's a boy that we are helping. He wants to fit in, and always and he's at that age now, starting, and all the time the support teacher is with him sitting, and it's mainstream school, so he become a bit of the joke of the class, and he hates it. So what I couldn't understand is, yes, he needs the help. Yet again, he cannot have the teacher, the assistant teacher, in the classroom. So it was a bit of confusing for him, because he's still trying to find friends in that, but some of them take advantage and bully him. So that's where I couldn't understand why he wanted his support teacher to be out. Today you explained to me. I'm learning, as parents are learning today.
And it is exactly that. And again, when you get to that age, your better part of socialising would actually be trying to find things outside of school. So for me, it was air cadets, because they don't do things like support staff in air cadets, but it's quite disciplined. It has a very strong structure, and it was really helpful for me. Something like that really helped me build my friendship groups outside of school. Because the other problem was, when I was in high school, originally, I wasn't allowed out on the playground. So there was a small group of us used to hang out in the English block, but that was it. So I did make some friends, because they were a lot like me, and we didn't make any friends outside the group, really.
Indeed. So you at that age, you're becoming. I'm coming back to another point. Still, I need to remind people who want to take part of this, and listening us here in Leicester or elsewhere, the number in the studio, you can call us direct 0116 482 2086. You can also WhatsApp or SMS to us, and we will be reading your questions here on the board. 07748 855055. If you want to be even anonymous, we are welcoming you as well. So you don't need to share your name or identity or name your child or anything. Yeah, even if you are there outside, there are an autistic adult who wants to chip in and share their experience. Coming back to the subject now, there are professionals who are very trained in their area, whether they are social service, whether they are consultant, the GPs, all that. But still, with all the education they had and interaction they might have, we still find people who are not sensible about going about autistic person when they're diagnosing, when they're talking to them. Now we're moving to the advice giving to the professionals. Go on, Trevor. What you would give a professional when they're assessing an adult, for example?
Oh, now that's a question. There's
it's a bit loaded, but
I think so. Yeah, I think first of all, I mean, the Autism Act and guidance requires professionals who are doing assessments to be properly trained. So I would encourage, if there are any professionals listening, to actually do what's called the Oliver McGowan training on learning disabilities and autism. Oliver McGowan was a young man who died in hospital, simply because the professionals around him, or some of the key professionals anyway, didn't understand those kind of autistic bits of his behaviour and what certain drugs might do to him. So his mum, Paula McGowan, set up this national programme called the Oliver McGowan training programme. So I'd encourage professionals to go on that, but quite a lot of already have. I think to use professional jargon, person-centred. Look at the person, try and understand what it is that they are and what they need, and don't make it a one-size-fits-all, because what works for me probably won't work for Dylan, and what works for Dylan probably wouldn't work for me and or my daughter. We're all very different, got different needs. So an assessment needs to be very focused on the person and not just kind of running through different spheres of assessment in the way that you normally do. So I think those two things is get trained, make it very, very person-centered, look at the person. Oh no, I'll add a third one, and try and identify what they might be good at as well as the things that they might struggle with. Because it took me 50 odd years to actually work out what I was good at. My school did not help me with that. They just kept telling me what I couldn't do instead of what I could do.
Thank you. Also, if I might chip in, also, I would want professionals to listen more, parents, especially those with limited communication, because I've been to that path with my son, who has a limited communication skills, and you find some old professionals who think they know best and not always trying to accommodate because you are the best who know your child. So listening more to the parents and questioning sympathetically, that empathy sometimes toward parents will help go.
To add into what Trevor was saying, it's absolutely right to try and embrace it in a more positive manner is key, especially when you come to one of the biggest problems that you have is if you're going to get someone like myself to try and access a service, it's going to be very difficult for me to be able to get myself there, and some others will have a far greater struggle than I will. So you actually also need to put the work in to build that relationship with them. So for example, if it's anyone who needs to get help like a counsellor, you need to make sure it's someone who works really well with them. Because if the first one suddenly is really bad, even if in theory that form of therapy could work, how are you going to get them to go again when you can't find the right person for them?
Yeah.
So that's one thing which I've seen before in the past, but I've had problems with counsellors because I've tried to see some and there's just some who just absolutely don't get it. Yeah. And they're the kind of people who just sit there and ask you.
And when they did ask Oliver and his parents, they didn't give the parents' views equal weighting to the professional views. Or, some people would say, well, the parents actually know them better than the professionals. So there's a lot in what you're both saying there about having the sense to actually have the knowledge, but to step back and listen to the people who know autistic people really well.
I'd go so far to say, as Trevor, I think you might agree with this, is the fact that because, of course, each person that's autistic or person with autism, depending on your choice of language, is so different. Yes, the training could cover so much, but when you're working with a specific person, you actually do need to learn more about how that person works. You always have to personalise the way you work. So the training's one step, and that's fantastic. But again, there will always be elements that won't work. And so it's also that attitude of needing to be willing to and wanting to understand more, because you always have to have an open mind when it comes to working with autistic people.
Indeed. We're coming to end of the program. Trevor, just concluding remarks and for you, last 30 seconds, please, what advice you will give a parent to parent?
Oh, parent to parent. I mean, be tolerant, to check things out. www.autismcentral.org is the organisation I mentioned earlier. And join parents group if there is one locally, because that's where some good tips can come in. My daughter does this. Does your daughter do that? What works with your daughter? And maybe using those networks.
Comparing the notes. Thank you. 10 seconds, Dylan.
Basically the same thing. One, don't forget you're not alone out there. There are plenty of groups. Like in Leicestershire alone, you have the LES, you have Spectrum, you have a group in Loughborough that meet up once every 2 months. And there's fantastic groups out there.
Thank you so much. You see, the Ramadan is cruising that. We will see each other next Monday, 8